May 17, 1943. U-Boat Command Headquarters, Cournevel, France. Capitaine Sorzé Eberhard Gott stared at the latest intelligence report about American escort carrier production with barely concealed contempt, his monocle catching the afternoon light as he examined photographs of what the Americans called an aircraft carrier. The image showed USS Bogue, already operational for 8 months but only now coming to German attention, a vessel so small, so obviously improvised, that Gott actually laughed aloud. He passed the photograph to Konteradmiral Hans-Georg von Friedeberg, who studied it with similar disdain. The Americans are building carriers from merchant ships, Gott noted in the war diary that evening. These floating crates with a few aircraft cannot possibly threaten our Wolfpacks. They lack the speed of fleet carriers, the armor of warships, the elegance of proper naval architecture. Desperation manifested in steel. What neither officer understood was that they were looking at the instrument of their own destruction. Within 18 months, these diminutive escort carriers would transform the Battle of the Atlantic from a German advantage to an Allied victory so complete that U-boat crews would refer to their missions as suicide runs. The transformation was already being written in American shipyards where Henry Kaiser was producing escort carriers faster than Germany could build submarines. The psychological journey from contempt to terror would unfold not over years but over months, as German naval officers discovered that American production logic had once again exceeded their imagination. The story began in earnest on June 8, 1941, when President Roosevelt, 18 months before Pearl Harbor, recognized what his admirals initially dismissed as impossible. America needed aircraft carriers, hundreds of them, but fleet carriers required 3 years to build and cost the equivalent of 10 destroyers. Roosevelt's solution seemed absurd to traditional naval thinkers on both sides of the Atlantic. Convert merchant ships into carriers, build them on commercial production lines, accept that they would be slow, vulnerable, and limited, but produce them in such quantities that their weaknesses became irrelevant. Captain Friedrich Rouge, serving as naval liaison to the German High Command, reviewed the initial American escort carrier specifications in early 1942 with professional incredulity. Maximum speed of 18 knots, barely faster than a surface submarine. Wooden flight decks on some models. Commercial-grade steel instead of armor plating. Single screws vulnerable to torpedo damage. Rouge wrote in his analysis for Admiral Raeder, "The Americans appear to be confusing quantity with quality. These vessels are maritime disasters waiting to happen. Any trained U-boat commander will feast upon them." The German naval establishment's confidence rested on solid foundations. Their U-boat force had sunk 1,299 Allied ships, totaling 6,266,000 tons, between September 1939 and December 1942. The Wolfpack tactics developed by Admiral Dönitz had turned the North Atlantic into what Churchill called the only thing that truly frightened him during the war. U-boats operated with near impunity, surfacing at night to chase convoys with diesel engines that gave them 17 knots surface speed. Aircraft posed the greatest threat to U-boats, but land-based planes couldn't reach the mid-Atlantic gap, that deadly space beyond aircraft range where U-boats congregated to slaughter merchant ships. Oberleutnant Sir Herbert Werner, commanding U-230, recorded in his war diary on March 3, 1943, his assessment of American escort carriers after first encountering one near convoy SC-121. Cited what appeared to be a merchant vessel with aircraft on deck. Too slow to be a threat, too small to carry meaningful air group. Maintained surveillance for 2 hours. Aircraft operations appeared amateur, with visible difficulties in wind conditions. Reported to BDU that American desperation now includes sending merchant ships with planes into combat zones. Werner's contempt reflected standard German naval doctrine that failed to grasp 3 critical factors. First, the escort carriers didn't need to be fast because they traveled with convoys that moved at 8 to 10 knots. Second, they didn't need large air groups because their aircraft only needed to force U-boats to submerge, reducing their speed from 17 knots to 7 knots underwater, making them unable to position for attacks. Third, and most critically, the Americans would build so many of these carriers that the entire Atlantic would fall within aircraft coverage. The production statistics that would doom the U-boat force were already accumulating by spring 1943, though German intelligence grossly underestimated them. Henry Kaiser's Vancouver-Washington shipyard had reduced construction time for a Casablanca-class escort carrier from 6 months to 10 weeks. By standardizing components and applying assembly line techniques learned from automobile manufacturing, Kaiser's workers could launch a new escort carrier every week by summer 1943. The Germans estimated American escort carrier production at perhaps one per month. The reality was closer to one every 5 days at peak production. Captain Lieutenant Peter Kremer, commanding U-333, experienced the first glimpse of what mass-produced naval aviation meant on April 23, 1943. His boat was running on the surface 650 miles southwest of Ireland, well within the mid-Atlantic gap that had always been safe from aircraft. The lookout's cry sent the crew scrambling. No land-based aircraft could reach this position. Then he saw them, 2 Avenger torpedo bombers approaching from the northeast. His war diary captured the confusion. Aircraft at impossible range from land. Must be from fleet carrier, but no fleet carrier reported in area. Crash dive initiated. Depth charges detonated close aboard. Sustained minor damage. Surfaced after 2 hours to find convoy with converted merchant vessel launching aircraft. How many of these ships do they have? The answer to Kremer's question would have shattered German morale. By May 1943, the United States Navy had commissioned 11 escort carriers with 40 more under construction. Each carrier operated between 24 and 30 aircraft. The pilots were mostly reservists, men who had been civilians 2 years earlier, trained in abbreviated programs that horrified traditional naval aviators. Yet these amateur pilots flying from merchant ship carriers were about to accomplish what the Kriegsmarine had declared impossible, the complete suppression of the U-boat threat. Rear Admiral Julius Führer, reviewing German naval intelligence reports in June 1943, noted the increasing frequency of U-boat encounters with carrier aircraft in previously safe areas. His analysis, found in captured documents after the war, revealed growing concern. American escort carriers now reported in North Atlantic, South Atlantic, Mediterranean approaches. Intelligence suggests at least 20 operational vessels. If accurate, this represents a fundamental alteration in convoy protection capability. Recommend immediate reassessment of Wolfpack tactics. The reassessment came too late. USS Bogue and her escorts had already begun what U-boat crews would later call the extended Black May period. On May 22, 1943, Bogue's aircraft spotted U-569 running on the surface. The submarine crash-dived, but the Avenger marked its position with smoke floats. 4 hours of coordinated attacks followed. U-569's commander, Captain Lieutenant Hans-Peter Hinsch, surfaced his dying boat long enough to radio a final message. Under continuous air attack, carrier aircraft maintaining contact despite evasion. No escape possible. Scuttling. Admiral Dönitz himself reviewed the message, initially suspecting British deception. Only when 2 more boats reported similar experiences did the reality begin penetrating German naval consciousness. Continuous air attack had been impossible in the mid-Atlantic, yet experienced commanders were reporting exactly that phenomenon. Captain Lieutenant Klaus Rudloff, commanding U-709, encountered USS Corps aircraft on June 24, 1943. His subsequent report revealed the tactical revolution, attacked by carrier aircraft 700 miles from nearest land, forced to remain submerged for 14 hours, battery exhausted. Surfaced at night to recharge, immediately detected by aircraft with apparent detection equipment. Aircraft appear to have unlimited persistence. Request instructions for dealing with continuous air coverage. There were no instructions because German naval doctrine had never contemplated continuous air coverage in mid-ocean. Operating in hunter-killer groups with 3 to 4 destroyers, each escort carrier could maintain dawn to dusk surveillance over a 100-mile radius. When multiple escort carriers operated together, they created overlapping zones that made surface operations suicidal for U-boats. The technical capabilities of American escort carriers exceeded German estimates significantly. Each Casablanca-class carrier displaced 7,800 tons and measured 512 feet in length. The flight deck could handle 20,000-pound aircraft landing at 80 miles per hour. The hangar deck accommodated 28 aircraft with maintenance facilities. Ammunition magazines held 500,000 rounds of machine gun ammunition, depth charges, bombs and torpedoes sufficient for 2 weeks of continuous operations. Korvettenkapitän Adalbert Schnee, one of Germany's most decorated U-boat commanders, encountered this reality on July 13, 1943, when U-201 was caught on the surface by aircraft from USS Corps. His post-action report revealed the shock. Aircraft appeared without warning, no time for proper crash dive. Went deep immediately, heard multiple depth charges, remained at maximum depth for 6 hours, surfaced after dark, immediately illuminated by aircraft with powerful light. This pattern repeated 3 times. Aircraft seemed to know exactly where we would surface. What Schnee didn't know was that Corps' aircraft carried ASV Mark III radar, capable of detecting a surfaced submarine at 15 miles in darkness. The equipment, combined with Lee lights for illumination and acoustic homing torpedoes, meant that darkness no longer protected U-boats. U-boat crews had always counted on night surface operations to recharge batteries and make speed to attack positions. Now every surface moment invited death from above. The production miracle enabling this transformation defied German comprehension. Kaiser Shipbuilding produced the 50th escort carrier, USS Casablanca, in November 1943, just 18 months after laying the first keel. The ship was built in 101 days from keel laying to commissioning. Every component was standardized. Parts manufactured in 267 factories across 32 states arrived at the shipyard on precise schedules. Assembly proceeded 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. German intelligence officer Fregattenkapitän Hans Meckel, analyzing American shipbuilding capacity in December 1943, wrote a report that Admiral Dönitz initially rejected as defeatist. American escort carrier production appears to exceed 1 unit weekly. At this rate, by mid-1944, they will possess over 100 such vessels. Each carrier negates the effectiveness of 3 to 5 U-boats. Projection indicates U-boat force will be neutralized within 12 months. By January 1944, American escort carriers were not just defending convoys but actively hunting U-boats. Hunter-killer groups centered on escort carriers prowled the Atlantic, using intelligence from ultra-intercepts to locate U-boat patrol lines. The hunted had become hunters, and German submarines found themselves trapped in an increasingly deadly environment. U-boat ace Captain Lieutenant Werner Henke, commanding U-515, experienced this reversal on April 9, 1944. Operating north of the Azores, U-515 was located by aircraft from USS Guadalcanal. Henke, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves with 26 ships sunk, found himself helpless against coordinated air and surface attack. His final radio message conveyed unprecedented desperation. Under attack by multiple aircraft. Cannot remain surfaced. Cannot escape submerged. Batteries failing. Chlorine gas in boat. Destroyer bearing down. Zeit ist The escort carrier Guadalcanal and her hunter-killer group had revolutionized anti-submarine warfare. Operating independently of convoys, they could pursue U-boat contacts for days. On this patrol alone, Guadalcanal's group would sink 3 U-boats and damage 2 others. The carrier's aircraft flew 2,484 hours in 30 days. German submarines that had once stalked the Atlantic now cowered beneath the waves. The technical superiority of American production extended beyond mere numbers. Each escort carrier incorporated lessons learned from previous operations. The Casablanca-class ships built in late 1943 featured improved radar, better communication systems, stronger flight decks, and enhanced crew habitability. German observers who expected American mass production to mean inferior quality discovered the opposite. Kapitän zur See Klaus Schultz, analyzing captured American technical documents in February 1944, reported to U-boat command. American escort carriers employ assembly techniques that should be impossible. Entire sections are prefabricated, down to installed equipment and wiring. These sections, weighing up to 200 tons, are lifted by cranes and welded together. A ship takes shape in weeks rather than months. Each vessel benefits from lessons learned on previous hulls. By March 1944, the psychological transformation of the U-boat force was complete. Crews that had once competed for tonnage sunk, now celebrated mere survival. Morale collapsed as experienced crews recognized their situation. With over 50 escort carriers operational and more launching monthly, there was nowhere in the Atlantic beyond aircraft reach. The numbers confirmed the transformation. In May 1943, before escort carriers became fully operational, U-boats sank 50 Allied ships. By May 1944, with over 60 escort carriers active, U-boats sank only 5 ships while losing 25 submarines. The exchange ratio had reversed so completely that Dönitz considered suspending operations entirely. USS Block Island exemplified the evolution of escort carrier tactics. Operating with 4 destroyer escorts, Block Island pioneered night operations using radar-equipped Avengers. On May 29, 1944, Block Island's aircraft located U-549 on the surface at night. The subsequent coordinated attack demonstrated American precision. Aircraft maintained contact while vectoring destroyers to the submarine's position. When U-549 dived, sonobuoys tracked its underwater movement. The submarine fought desperately, managing to torpedo Block Island before being destroyed. This loss of Block Island, one of only 6 escort carriers lost during the war, illustrated American industrial supremacy rather than German success. Block Island was replaced by 2 escort carriers within weeks. Her aircraft and crew transferred to other carriers with barely a pause in operations. Gross Admiral Admiral Dönitz confronted this reality in a staff conference on June 2, 1944. The transcript reveals complete understanding. The enemy's small carriers have eliminated our tactical advantages. We cannot operate on the surface by day due to aircraft. We cannot operate on the surface by night due to radar. The Americans have not defeated our submarines. They have made submarines obsolete. By August 1944, the United States Navy operated 77 escort carriers with 35 more under construction. These ships had moved beyond convoy protection to become offensive weapons. Operating off the European coast, escort carriers supported the Normandy invasion and hunted U-boats in the Bay of Biscay. German coastal U-boat bases, previously immune to naval attack, now faced carrier aircraft striking from beyond the range of land-based fighters. The technical evolution continued throughout 1944. The Commencement Bay class, larger and faster than the Casablancas, began entering service. These ships displaced 11,373 tons and could make 19 knots. Their flight decks stretched 553 feet. Each ship cost $11 million and required 8 months to build, still a fraction of fleet carrier cost and time. German naval intelligence struggled to comprehend the industrial capacity these ships represented. Korvettenkapitän Ernst Haschagen, analyzing American production in September 1944, wrote, "Each escort carrier requires 30,000 tons of steel, 2,000 miles of electrical cable, 50 miles of piping, 80,000 blueprints, and 45,000 different components. Yet they produce them like automobiles. Seattle-Tacoma Shipbuilding alone has delivered 16 carriers in 18 months. Captain Daniel Gallery, commanding USS Guadalcanal, achieved the ultimate demonstration of escort carrier dominance on June 4, 1944. His hunter-killer group forced U-505 to the surface and captured it intact, the first enemy warship captured at sea by the U.S. Navy since 1815. The submarine's seizure demonstrated that U-boats were now prey rather than predators. The statistics of transformation were overwhelming. In 1942, before escort carriers became operational, U-boats sank 1,160 Allied ships totaling 6,266,000 tons. In 1944, with escort carriers dominating the Atlantic, U-boats sank 132 ships totaling 773,000 tons, while losing 249 submarines. German recognition of this transformation appeared in unexpected places. Lieutenant Zur See Hans Rudolf Rosing, captured from U-846 in May 1944, told interrogators, "We knew the war was lost when we counted your escort carriers. In 1943, we laughed at them. By 1944, we feared them more than battleships. An escort carrier could clear the entire ocean." Total escort carrier production reached 151 ships by war's end, 122 built in the United States and 29 in Britain, using American designs. These ships operated approximately 4,000 aircraft, more than the entire German Luftwaffe possessed in 1944. The pilots, trained in programs that produced 35,000 naval aviators annually, outnumbered total German U-boat crews by a factor of 3. Vice Admiral Lionel Wells, analyzing escort carrier effectiveness after the war, concluded, "The escort carrier program represented the perfect convergence of industrial capacity, tactical innovation, and strategic necessity. We built merchant ships that could launch aircraft, trained civilians to fly them, and changed the fundamental nature of naval warfare." The human dimension was captured in the interrogation of Captain Lieutenant Wolfgang Hader, captured from U-575 in March 1944. "Your escort carriers killed the U-boat force through presence. They were everywhere, always. We spent entire patrols submerged, seeing nothing. Men went mad from the stress. Those little carriers you built in weeks destroyed the elite of German naval power." Admiral Royal Ingersoll, Commander-in-Chief of the Atlantic Fleet, testified to Congress in March 1945. "The escort carrier program succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. We anticipated they would help protect convoys. Instead, they eliminated the submarine threat entirely. The Battle of the Atlantic was won not by destroyers or patrol aircraft, but by these converted merchant ships. The German Navy's final assessment came from Gross Admiral Dönitz in his farewell address to the U-boat force on May 4, 1945. You fought gallantly against overwhelming odds. The enemy's production of aircraft carriers made our struggle hopeless. They built carriers faster than we could build submarines, trained pilots faster than we could train crews, and covered the ocean with aircraft. Post-war analysis revealed the full scope. These ships flew over 460,000 combat sorties during the war. Their aircraft sank or participated in sinking 53 U-boats and 17 Japanese submarines. They provided air cover for every major amphibious operation after 1943. Only 6 American escort carriers were lost to enemy action. The Kaiser shipyards that produced most escort carriers became symbols of American manufacturing power. Workers who had never built ships before the war were launching carriers at rates that peacetime professionals considered impossible. Women comprised 27% of the workforce, African Americans another 15%. This diverse workforce produced carriers that swept German submarines from the seas. Captain Eric Brown, British test pilot who flew from numerous American escort carriers, provided perspective. The Germans mocked these ships because they didn't understand the revolution they represented. One escort carrier was vulnerable. 50 escort carriers were invincible. The Americans grasped this. The Germans never did until too late. Fregattenkapitän Otto Kretschmer, Germany's most successful U-boat ace before his capture in 1941, watched the transformation from prisoner camps. Released after the war, he wrote, "We fail to understand that Americans approached war as an industrial problem. While we focused on tactics and crew quality, they focused on production and coverage. The escort carriers were not better ships. They were the right ships in the right numbers." German U-boat veteran Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock, who commanded U-96, reflected in 1975, "The escort carriers taught us humility. We thought war was about warrior skill and superior tactics. The Americans showed us war was about industrial capacity and systematic coverage. Those little carriers we mocked represented something we never understood, the ability to transform any problem into a production solution." Rear Admiral Calvin Durgin, who commanded escort carrier task groups, summarized, "We took merchant hulls, added flight decks, and changed naval history. The Germans laughed because they saw converted merchantmen. We saw mobile airfields that could be anywhere, any time. They counted ships. We counted coverage area." The final irony came from Adolf Hitler himself, who in April 1945 reportedly asked Dönitz why the U-boats were failing. Dönitz explained about the escort carriers. Hitler allegedly responded, "Why did we not build such vessels?" Dönitz replied, "Because we could not build one per week." Hitler had no response. By May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered, the United States Navy operated 105 escort carriers with more under construction. These ships had made the Atlantic an Allied lake. The U-boat force that had nearly starved Britain was itself starved of operational space. Many late-war U-boats never fired a torpedo in anger, spending their entire careers hiding from carrier aircraft. Statistical analysis confirmed the transformation. In 1942, a U-boat had a 75% chance of returning from patrol. By early 1945, survival rate dropped to 25%. The primary cause was aircraft, predominantly from escort carriers. Of 40,000 German U-boat sailors, 30,000 died, a 75% casualty rate. Most died after escort carriers made submarine operations essentially suicidal. These men were sacrificed to a strategic misconception that American industrial capacity couldn't overcome German tactical expertise. Commander George Chamberlain, who served aboard USS Guadalcanal, offered perspective. "We weren't better sailors than the Germans. Their U-boat crews were incredibly brave and skilled. But we had endless carriers with endless aircraft. Every submarine they built, we countered with a carrier that could hunt it. It wasn't fair. It wasn't supposed to be." The escort carrier program cost approximately $1.5 billion in 1940s dollars. This investment destroyed U-boat forces while saving countless Allied merchant ships. Each escort carrier cost about $7 million and could protect convoys worth hundreds of millions while destroying submarines worth millions more. Workers at Kaiser shipyards expressed pride in their achievement. Rosie Devlin, a welder who worked on 12 escort carriers, said, "We knew those ships weren't pretty. They were basic and simple, but we also knew they worked. Every carrier we launched meant convoys would arrive safely. We were fighting the war with rivet guns and welding torches." The final accounting was stark. Germany began the war with 57 operational U-boats and built 1,162 more. They lost 785 U-boats, 632 to Allied action. Approximately 175 were destroyed by escort carrier aircraft or hunter-killer groups. Considering escort carriers only became fully operational in mid-1943, this represented extraordinary effectiveness. Starting with 0 escort carriers in 1941, the United States built 151 by 1945. These ships operated approximately 4,500 aircraft at peak strength. They flew over 460,000 sorties and fundamentally changed naval warfare while maintaining an operational rate exceeding 80%. German U-boat commander Herbert Werner, one of few to survive the entire war, provided the summary, "The escort carriers killed us through superior presence. We could avoid individual ships, but not systematic coverage. Every carrier they launched shrunk our operational area, until finally we had nowhere to go but down." The transformation from German contempt to despair occurred in less than 18 months. This rapid reversal demonstrated that industrial warfare operated on different timescales than traditional military planning. While Germany slowly improved submarine technology, America rapidly multiplied carrier production. The German response, found in captured Kriegsmarine archives, was resignation. The American escort carrier program succeeded through brute industrial force. They built carriers faster than we could sink them, trained pilots faster than we could shoot them down. We were defeated not by better warriors but by better factories. The escort carriers that German admirals laughed at in 1943 had by 1945 transformed the Atlantic from a U-boat hunting ground into an Allied lake. These converted merchant ships accomplished what the Royal Navy's destroyers could not: the complete suppression of the submarine threat through overwhelming presence. The German admirals who laughed at escort carriers in 1943 lived, if they survived, to see these same vessels accepting U-boat surrenders in 1945. The transformation took less than 2 years. In that brief period, American industrial capacity rewrote naval warfare rules that had existed for centuries. The story ends where it began, with German naval officers examining American escort carriers. But instead of laughing at their crude construction, they stood silent, understanding finally that these simple ships had destroyed the U-boat force more completely than any enemy in history. American industrial might had transformed maritime warfare forever. The final testimony came from Gross Admiral Dönitz himself, speaking to his staff as Germany surrendered. "We lost the Battle of the Atlantic not to superior seamanship, but to superior arithmetic. The Americans built escort carriers faster than we could comprehend. We thought war was about warriors. They knew it was about production. We were wrong. They were right. That is why we lost."